In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to navigate the Sentencing Worksheet Interactive File Transfer application, also known as SWIFT, using court data. So first, you're going to want to log in using your credentials. Click the Login button. Acknowledge that you accept the terms of service for using SWIFT. Then the guideline search screen will appear. Now you can utilize data from General District Court or Circuit Court, but for this example, we're going to use a Circuit Court. So you're going to select your court from the drop-down menu here, and in this case, go to Tazewell County Circuit Court. You select your court from the drop-down menu, and then you want to type in your defendant's name, last name first. Click Submit. The SWIFT will display all pending charges for this defendant in the court you selected. This defendant currently has 5 charges pending. If there's a check mark next to the charge, that indicates that this offense is covered by the sentencing guidelines. If there were a circle next to the charge, that would indicate it was a probation violation offense. This defendant currently has no probation violations pending in Tazewell County Circuit Court. This defendant does, however, have 3 offenses which are not guidelines offenses. All 5 of these offenses share the same hearing date. Now you can click on any one of these offenses, but I prefer to determine my primary offense first and then click on that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Schedule 1 or 2 possession. Now the worksheets produced by SWIFT depend on the primary offense you selected. Now what SWIFT will do is SWIFT will populate all of the boxes for the allotted charges or the allotted number of charges and their associated counts based on the offense that you actually selected. So I selected possess Schedule 1 or 2 drug because I knew that was going to be my primary. But if I had not selected the correct primary, I would just use the drop-down menu and select the appropriate offense. Now, possess Schedule 4 drug is not the primary here, but I just want to show you what happens when you change the primary offense. So if I change it to possess Schedule 4 drug, that is not a guidelines offense. So what SWIFT will do is it will change it to just the cover sheet, and then SWIFT will populate the circle here indicating that your primary offense is not a guidelines offense. So let me go back and change it to possess Schedule 1 or 2 drug. SWIFT changes the worksheet back to drug Schedule 1 or 2 because again, SWIFT will change the worksheet based on what primary offense you select. So let me go down here and make my additional offense the Schedule 4 drugs. Now this defendant had 5 charges, but he had multiple counts of each charge. So that's why I only have 2 boxes here. 2 counts of possess Schedule 1 or 2 and 3 counts of possess Schedule 4. If I want to see each individual count, I would just go over here next to the number of counts and I would click on the arrow. You see what happens is SWIFT will display each individual offense date pertaining to each count as well as the corresponding docket number for each count. Let's go take a look at possess Schedule 4. Again, there were 3 counts of possess Schedule 4. I click on that arrow. Offense will display each individual offense date as well as the corresponding docket number for each individual offense. Now let's say that I need to remove an individual offense, but not all counts of that offense. So let's say, for example, the Commonwealth at sentencing is going to null pros 1 count of possess Schedule 4 drug, and they want to null pros the one that occurred on January 27, 2017. So I would just go to that individual charge and click on the minus button next to the docket number, and that will remove only that particular count of possess Schedule 4 drug. Let's say I want to add a count that's not yet pending. Say this defendant had another possessed Schedule 1 or 2 drug that's not yet pending in circuit court, but I know it's going to be sentenced with this offense and included in the sentencing event. So to add an additional count, I would go next to the number of counts and click on this plus button, and that will give me the ability to add another offense date. So let me enter an offense date here. And again, I'm going to have to enter the corresponding docket number. Now let's say I need to add an offense that wasn't pending and didn't already exist. Say there's 2 failure to appears. This defendant failed to appear twice. So I need to add these charges. They're not yet pending in circuit court, but I need to add them and they're not in my drop-down menu here. So to manually add a charge, I would just go over here to additional offenses. I would click this plus button and that gives me the ability to manually enter a charge. So let me enter the VCC code. Now another function of Swift is if you enter a VCC code that is not valid, for example, let's say I typed in the wrong number, Swift will give me a warning message indicating that I've entered an invalid VCC code and I need to enter a valid VCC code. So let me go back and change this to the correct one. Okay. There we go. So there's the correct VCC code. And when you manually enter a correct VCC code, Swift will populate the description. So again, I have to enter the date. And the corresponding docket number. Remember, there were 2 counts of failure to appear, so to add another account, I would just click the plus. Again, have to enter the offense date and the corresponding docket number. There we go. Now say I need to delete an entire charge. I know that they're going to delete not just one individual count, but every count of a specific offense. So let's say in this case, I know they're going to null pros both failure to appears when they go to sentencing. I don't need to go to each individual offense and delete it. If I know that they're going to delete both counts or all counts of this failure to appear charge, I only need to go over here to the minus symbol right next to the offense and click on it, and that will delete that offense and all associated counts. Okay, so let's go back to the top here. Now Swift is going to populate the demographic information for you from court data. However, the social security number and date of birth will not populate. In the future, when Swift goes fully electronic and the worksheets are electronically submitted, the social security number and date of birth will show up on the judge's electronic copy. It just will not show up on yours, the official preparer or the defense attorney if you're trying to work out different scenarios. So if you are the official preparer right now, we are still using paper copies. Nothing is electronically being submitted to the court at the moment. So you still would need to manually enter the social security number and date of birth at this time. So let's go down here, enter the judge's name. You would enter the attorney's names. Right. Let's say it's cocaine. It was a guilty plea. Now there's 2 ways to navigate Swift. You can navigate by using this next button down here on the bottom, which would just take you to the next page. Or you can go up here to the squares on the top of the worksheet. When you hover over a square, it tells you where it's going to take you. We know we need to go to section A. So let's go ahead and go to section A and score out the worksheet. You can manually enter in the scores, or you can go ahead and click on them. Okay. And no additional offenses. I have a total of 23. We know the purpose of worksheet A is to determine whether or not you need to go to worksheet B for the guidelines recommendation or worksheet C. Swift, if you click on the next button will automatically take you to the appropriate worksheet based on your total score. We need to go to C based on our score. So when I click next, Swift is going to take me to worksheet C. Let's go ahead and score out worksheet C. Now on worksheet C, for these three factors, primary offense remaining counts, additional offenses, and prior convictions adjudications, you cannot click on the score to populate the box because the scoring rule here is different. Remember, we total the maximum penalties. I'm sorry, we don't total them. We assign points to the maximum penalties, then we total the points. So I'm going to go ahead and score out the rest of this. And again, I have to manually enter for this factor. 7. Okay, so after I score out C, I get a total of 32. I click next, and that will take me to the nonviolent risk assessment. If I check yes to any of the ineligibility conditions, Swift will not open up the nonviolent risk assessment. But if I click no, if the answer is no to all of the ineligibility conditions, Swift will open up the nonviolent risk assessment so that you can score it out. And again, you could just click on the scores or manually enter them. Gives me a total of 19. I'm going to go back to my cover sheet here. And when I go down to the recommendation, you see that Swift has populated the recommendation from section C based on the score on section C. Swift has also populated the recommendation from the nonviolent risk assessment. Now I'm going to want to save the worksheet that I've created. Now, in order to save the worksheet, you have to have a valid scheduled sentencing date and valid docket number. When you use court data, Swift will populate that for you. Go ahead and click Save. Now that I've clicked Save, I have all these other options up here for my worksheet. So if I want to make changes to this existing draft, let's say, for example, I'm going to go back to section C, because this guy had a violent record. He was a category 2, and I inadvertently clicked other. I'm going to go ahead and click category 2. That will change my primary offense factor score and also the total. So I've made my changes. I go back to the cover sheet. You'll see that Swift has updated the recommendation based on the updated score from worksheet C. And I click Update. Clicking Update will save any changes to an existing draft that you are currently working on. Okay. Now let's say I want to make a copy of this. Or actually print out a copy is what I meant to say. I want to print out a copy of my worksheet, so I just click PDF. For review purposes only will appear on the top of every page of the worksheets. Now, another feature I want to point out is the worksheets now will only display, or the cover sheet will only display, the primary offense and the number of counts for the primary offense. We now have something called the offense details page, which will list each individual offense in the sentencing event. So let's go ahead and scroll down so I can show you what that looks like. So the offense details page will list each offense and each individual count with the offense date for each count and the docket number for each associated count. So we had 3 counts of possessed Schedule 1 or 2 drug. All 3 offense dates are listed, and the corresponding docket numbers for those offenses are also listed. And the same will happen for additional offenses now. We had 2 counts of possessed Schedule 4 drug as additional offenses. Swift now will display the offense date for each of those counts as well as a corresponding docket number for each count. All right. Now let's say I'm ready to submit this to the court. So I want to finalize my draft and submit it to the court. I'm ready to submit it. So to submit it to the court, I'm going to click on Final. Okay. So I click on Final and click OK. Now currently we are still using paper copies. When you're clicking on Final right now, it will not electronically submit the worksheets to the court. Right now, the only purpose of the Final button is to remove the words "for review purposes only" from the worksheets. So I'm going to click OK. So right now, again, we're still using paper copies. So you still have to print out paper copies and distribute them to all interested parties. So now that I've clicked on the Final button, there's a check next to the Final button to indicate that I've finalized this draft. I'm going to click on PDF. And now the words "for review purposes only" are gone, and Swift has generated a unique identification number for this set of guidelines. Again, remember, we have to print out PDF copies and submit them to all interested parties, because when you submit Final, it is not submitting an electronic copy to the court at this time. Now, you cannot make any changes to a finalized draft, but you can submit multiple finalized drafts to the court. So let's say, for example, you had made an error, or you need to have an alternative set of guidelines for the court. You would just go to your final draft and you'd click Clone. This will make an exact copy of your previously finalized draft. And you'll see now you have an additional draft, because now it's showing draft number 2. If I wanted to go back to the finalized draft, I just come down here and click on 1. That'd take me back to the original one, but we're going to go back to the duplicate. I would make any changes I want to the guidelines. Let's say, for example, we're just going to have 1 count of possessed Schedule 1 or 2 drug. So let me go ahead and remove the counts that they're not going to be sentenced for. I would go back and change my scores. Okay. Right. And say I made an error also, he wasn't on legal restraint at the time of the instant offense. And there was no firearm, or no 6-month mandatory minimum. Take that out. I'm going to take this out. So I've changed my scores to reflect the current sentencing conviction. Now notice now my score is only 1, and I need to go to section B instead of C, and I click Next. Swift will take me to section B now based on that score from section A. So I'm going to score out section A, go back to my cover sheet, or go to section D actually. So he was recommended for probation, no incarceration, so this will no longer apply. I go back to my cover sheet. So Swift has changed the recommendation to reflect the section B recommendation, and that the nonviolent risk assessment is no longer applicable because he was already recommended for probation, no incarceration. So to save this, I'm going to click Update. Click OK. Finalize this one as well. And now I have 2 final drafts, and I can print this out. Again, now I only have 1 offense in the sentencing event, so there will be no offenses listed on the offense detail page other than the primary offense. Now, one other thing you could do, if you have multiple drafts and you wanted to delete a draft, you can always delete a draft that's not been finalized by selecting that draft and clicking on the delete button. So hopefully you found this tutorial helpful. If at any time you are using Swift and you get stuck or have any questions, please feel free to call the hotline at 804-225-4398 for any assistance.